Want to see?
We shall overcome.
The sit-in protests began in the 1960s in response to racial segregation during the Civil Rights Movement. SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, organized and carried out the movement where protesters would sit in at white-only lunch counters until they were served food. However, the protesters would often have to sit in for hours at a time while having to cope with white onlookers screaming obscenities in their ears, throwing food on them, and even beating them. Nevertheless, soon the sit-in movements would spread across the nation as a popular form of nonviolent protest. Today, the memory of the sit-ins has been preserved in the exhibit How Long Can You Last at the Center for Human and Civil Rights in Atlanta, Georgia. We argued that because the exhibit simulates the experience of being a 1960s protester, it creates a connection between the museum visitors and protesters.
As you take a seat, the dim lighting and muted colors of the exhibit surround you, creating a solemn ambiance. When you read the title, How Long Can You Last?, you are presented with a challenge. You feel nervous in anticipation of what is to come. You then read the instructions telling you to experience a simulated response to your nonviolent protest that directly places you, the museum's visitor, in the seat of a 1960s protester. In addition to being compared to protesters, the setting and the sensory-filled experience help solidify your connection with them. For instance, one of the first things you notice is that the chairs you sit at and the surface you rest your hands on resemble a 1960s lunch counter. After you put your headphones on, this exhibit feels more realistic. You hear screaming and crashing and feel the kicks in your chair. You are instructed to keep your eyes closed so you can envision yourself in that time period. You are also asked to place your hands on the counter, limiting your movements, reminding you that you cannot fight back as it is a nonviolent protest.
The exhibit also develops tension to make the simulation more realistic so that you can better understand the challenges that the protesters faced. The violence, both physical and verbal, continuously increased during the simulation. At first you hear softer sounds as white customers enter the diner and casually converse, but then the sounds of the conversation become louder and louder into yelling, and violence ensues as you hear the smashing of glass, friends being beat, and a nasty voice so close to your ear it sends chills through your body. Then you feel bang that jerks your chair. Just when you think you can't take any more, the chaos cuts to silence and an automated voice brings you back to reality. When you open your eyes, you see a reflection of yourself within a projected photo of the sit-ins. The mirror literally places you into the setting of the sit-ins, but the timestamp in red reading 2 minutes urges you to reflect on yourself and your experiences as a protester. It serves as a reminder that unlike us, the protesters were not able to escape their realities by opening their eyes. Although the simulation may have felt like an eternity, 2 minutes cannot compare to the months the protesters fought through.
For the protesters of 1960, sitting in at lunch counters was a necessary and strategic step in the fight for equality rather than a choice made by museum visitors. When people realize this, they can empathize more with the movement and establish a connection between themselves and the protesters. The exhibit was able to create this connection through the combination of the setting, mood, and sensory experiences so that generations after can better understand the courage it took to stand up in the face of oppression and demand change.
We shall overcome. We shall.
So, what did you think?
We shall.